with this community. You are indeed welcome here. And now Reverend Carol will invite our bowl to sound. And as she does, we invite you to find the still, quiet place inside of yourself where there is peace. And I believe Lori has the chalice lighting while Reverend Carol lights our chalice for us.
Thank you. This is from Wayne Muller from Sabbath, Finding Rest, Renewal, and Delight in Our Busy Lives. All life requires a rhythm of rest. There is a rhythm in our waking activity and the body's need for sleep. There is a rhythm in the way day dissolves into night and night into morning. There is a rhythm as the active growth of spring and summer is quieted by the necessary dormancy of fall and winter. There is a tidal rhythm, a deep, eternal conversation between the land and the great sea. In our bodies, the heart perceptibly rests after each life-giving beat. The lungs rest between the exhale and the inhale. We too must have a period in which we lie fallow and restore our souls.
The Board of Trustees and Reverend Carol have made a covenant to honor her time of sabbatical, which will be occurring over the upcoming 2 congregational years. Here is how that covenant opens. A sabbatical is rooted in the ancient concept of Sabbath, a day of rest after 6 days. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, a ministerial sabbatical is an extended respite from professional responsibilities designed to create opportunities for rest, renewal, and education. Given the very intense, demanding, and 24/7 nature of ministry, it is essential that called ministers take time away from their duties to renew their bodies and spirits in order to serve fully and well. This past week, Olympic gymnast Simone Biles has given us all a lesson in resilience and self-care. The 24-year-old withdrew from the final individual all-round competition in Tokyo, citing mental health concerns as her reason. She posted on social media that she felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, but because of her high-profile place as the very face of the Olympic Games, her decision to step back has been fodder for news headlines around the globe. Needless to say, the last 18 months have been particularly difficult in the life of WUUC. The pressures of maintaining worship, religious education, pastoral care, and other essential components of congregational life have taken a heavy toll on all of us, and especially on our hardworking staff. Fortunately, the UUA offers a built-in mechanism allowing ministers to take a much-needed respite from pastoral responsibilities. It has become customary for Unitarian Universalist ministers to take regular sabbaticals, time away from the constant demands of the congregation, to be spent in rest and revitalization. Most of us cannot begin to imagine the pressure of being a star Olympic athlete, much less a star Black Olympic athlete. And I doubt that many of us can accurately understand the demands of being a pastoral minister no matter how supportive and appreciative we are of the work that Reverend Carroll does for us and for our congregation daily. But most of us vividly know the pressures that impact each one of us daily, especially those of us who are not fortunate enough to have reached retirement age. I wonder how often we have been courageous enough to allow ourselves the grace to step back, to breathe, to attend to our own self-care. As we face the task of navigating through Reverend Carroll's periodic absences in the coming months, perhaps we should also take the time to be attentive to our own needs for renewal, for rest, for sabbatical.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? So we're going to talk a little bit today about the logistics of my sabbatical so that you all have a chance to ask any questions you have about that. But we're really going to talk more about you and sabbatical and you and Sabbath.
We're losing you.
All right, let me move over. Judy, how's that? Is that better? Better?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we got logistical issues. It's, technology. Welcome to Zoom. Welcome to our world of Zoom. Okay, so we're going to talk about a little bit of the logistics of my sabbatical, but also more about you all and Sabbath and sabbatical. So first, let me just say a big thank you to Lori and Ellen and the other people who are on the Sabbatical Committee. So that includes Barry Schumpert, Diane Gray, and Ann Harvey. They represent you all, right? So the worship committee, the congregation, the board, the welcoming congregation team, adult RE, it's designed to represent you all, right? So those are the people in times when I'm gone over the next couple of years that you all can turn to with your questions. And you can do that today as well. We can answer questions. So what I'm going to do first, this is a little different than what I did in the outdoor service, but I'm going to switch this up because you all have probably heard something about this. We've been talking about it for a while. There's no one here who's particularly new. So let me just give you some logistical details first, and then we'll talk about how this applies to you. So the logistics of my sabbatical time are this. According to my letter of agreement with the congregation, I get 3 weeks of paid sabbatical leave for every year I serve as minister. And then I get to take that every 5 to 7 years. So last June, I had accrued 15 weeks of sabbatical time, which I would have taken had we not had a pandemic. But we had a pandemic. So I postponed it. So now I have 18 weeks of sabbatical time, plus a little bit of unused vacation time that also accrues, plus my regular vacation time. All of that pooled up together would have given me like 27 weeks of leave this year. And it just does not seem like a wise idea to leave for 7 months. It just doesn't seem even reasonable. So I'm taking my sabbatical spread out over 2 years in little chunks, right? So that's a few weeks in August this year, a few weeks in November, some time in the winter, and some time in the early summer. And then next year, we'll figure out next year when it gets closer. So what that means is that while I'm out of town, if I'm taking a break, whatever's happening, the Sabbatical Committee is here. They will be handling anything that comes up, but also the congregation is very competent to handle what's going on. And I'm not leaving for any period long enough that if something comes up, I won't be back relatively soon to help with it. And also we have emergency measures in place. So many of you know Mike Fisher, who is a retired psychiatrist. He has agreed to be on call for anything that comes up that might require that kind of support. We also have other local ministers who, if there was some kind of emergency that required a minister's presence, they would be available. And of course, if there's anything seriously catastrophic in our congregation, the Sabbatical Committee and the board will be able to get a hold of me and I'll come back for anything that's really important. So that's the logistics of how it's going to work. But let's talk about what sabbatical actually means. Because it is really easy to think that the minister taking a sabbatical is just, you all just go on as you always have, and I'm gone some. But really, a sabbatical is meant to be a time of renewal for the congregation too, because it's meant to help us refocus our attention and our awareness. So it's meant for the minister to be getting renewal and rest and creativity and inspiration, but it's also meant to do that for the congregation. So at our last Sabbatical Committee meeting, Lori read this quote from this contemporary kind of hip philosopher and author, Mokokamoa. It's Mokokamoa Mokonona. His name is really hard to pronounce, and I didn't do it well. But the quote is wonderful. He said, "The wise rest at least as hard as they work." And you can take that a lot of ways. Westerners have a tendency to rest not very restfully. If you think about Western society, we have a tendency to really think that productivity and accomplishment are the path to happiness. And we tend to get pretty upset when things aren't done. And so often, Ellen made the comment about the luxury of retirement. And I'm going to venture to say that I know a whole bunch of retired people in this congregation and elsewhere who are not particularly restful, who are awfully busy because there's so much they want to get done, right? There's just so much to do, so much to do. And that phrase, the wise rest, you could take that two ways. You can take that as the wise people choose to rest, or you can take it as you should choose the wise rest versus the not so wise rest. So wise is, you can talk about wisdom related to people or to actual resting practices. So in modern society, we tend to think of rest as synonymous with vacation. Like, oh, we're going to take a break, we're going to take a vacation. And then we promptly start planning something, right? We promptly start looking at Airbnbs and hotels and, mileage, and start planning an itinerary. We talked about this recently, about how we tend to be tourists rather than travelers. We also tend to be vacationers instead of people who rest. So rest is something interesting, we were talking this morning during the service, after the service, people were talking about the ways that despite being retired, they're not being restful. So Barry mentioned that he's always out in his garden, working, but he never sits down to just enjoy the garden. Because the second he sits down to enjoy the garden, he noticed something else that needs to be done. He's got to get up and do it, right? So think for a minute about your own needs for rest. Now, there can be lots of ways that this looks. We often, when we say, oh, so-and-so is going to get a few weeks off, we're like, what are they going to do with it? But rest can look like a lot of things. It can look like, I was saying this morning, choosing to not do the dishes. Rest can look like leaving the laundry piling up an extra day. It can look like letting that project sit even though you feel kind of guilty about it, right? It can mean doing things that you think you'll be judged for, like staying in a luxury hotel, right? Oh, that's not my values. I shouldn't stay in a luxury hotel. Or go camping in a remote wilderness when other people say you shouldn't do that alone. That's dangerous, right? And one of the things that we are frequently doing that's very not restful, that we don't know how to get out of, is fretting and worrying. How many of us need a rest from worrying? Trying to fix other things, to fix other people's problems, to fix situations that are out of control, to fix things that we don't know how to fix, right? We need a rest from that. So the idea of Sabbath or sabbatical is really more than just vacation, right? It's really about how do you actually stop and rest. And one of the most important qualities that we have to remember is that we can only do that in the context of community, right? So let's take the example of the dishes, which I was using that example this morning during our worship service outside. So yesterday at home at the farm, I spent the morning doing a bunch of church work and paperwork and things like that, and also dealing with, you know, some crises for my kids, and I was exhausted. And Tracy came home from the market with so many tomatoes that had to be processed. So, okay, I had the energy to can tomatoes yesterday, and I did. I canned a whole bunch of tomatoes, but I did not have the energy to do the dishes. The kitchen is piled high with dishes. As we speak, the kitchen may still be piled high with dishes. But if I make the assumption that I have to do everything myself, that I'm the one who has to take care of it, that I'm the only one who's going to do that thing, I may be right, but I might be wrong, right? So I might get home and those dishes might be done. I can't count the number of times when after a meal I have said, oh, I don't want to do the dishes. And Tracy said, leave them, I'll take care of them. But that's not soon enough for me. I can't handle the anxiety of those dishes sitting a little longer till he's ready to do them. So I do them and make myself more tired. Instead of trusting that somebody else is capable, maybe on a different schedule, maybe in a different way, of doing something to help me get more rest. So often, what we really need rest from is the things we feel like we're responsible for that we think nobody else can do, right? So one of the things that makes it possible for me to take a sabbatical here is that there's a great worship team. And when we say, hey, is anybody else interested in leading worship? Instantly, a couple people raise their hands and say, well, I'd like to do that. There are people capable of doing all sorts of things that in a vacuum, like if I'm here, you know, people are going to be like, well, Carol does that. We'll let Carol do that. But if I'm not here, people might say, well, I'd like to try that. Or I might be able to help with that. When we step out of the way and rest, we not only renew ourselves, we also give other people the opportunity to step in, to step up, to try things. And we get some creative, you know, infusions of new energy that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So things will happen during worship here while I'm gone that wouldn't happen if I were here, because people would just say, well, Carol's supposed to do so many services, so she's going to just do those. And then I get in a rut, we get in ruts. So the point of a sabbatical and a Sabbath is also to allow for new creativity to happen, right? So ask yourself a couple questions. First, what are the ways you would like to rest that you don't allow yourself to rest? Doesn't matter if you're retired or not retired. What are the ways that you would like to rest that you don't allow yourself to rest? And what are the reasons you tell yourself you can't do that? Right? It's really easy for me to think, well, I have to do that because if I don't, nobody else will do it. Maybe that's true, maybe it's not. But even if it is true, I might do it better after I've had a rest, right? Wayne Muller, who, you know, the words that Ellen read for the chalice lighting, Wayne Muller, he talks about how one of the things that happens to us is when we're in this frenetic mode, when we're busy, and we think we have to take care of things, we often problem solve from a not very good place. So we tend to problem solve from a place of panic and anxiety and stress and fear, rather than from a place of perspective and renewal and calm. And so when we actually resist the urge to react, which is hard, it's very hard. I do the dishes an awful lot when I really would like to not do the dishes because I do. But when I can stop, when we can choose to not react and rest, actually we get perspective and new solutions arise. and new creativity comes up. So this is something to think about, right? Even as we are dealing with change and constant adaptation right now, not knowing how things are going to go, actually choosing to not react and to go into a restful place. This idea of Sabbath is that we take breaks. We purposefully take breaks to get perspective. We let things stop. We let the dishes sit. We let the laundry sit. We let the weeds grow in the garden. We let it go unresolved. And we consciously choose not to worry. I pose that challenge to you all today. The thing you worry about, I pose the challenge to you to choose to not worry for a little chunk of time. Take a little sabbatical from worrying and just see how that changes your perspective. Sometimes we feel like our own immediate action is required for the world to keep spinning, but the truth is it isn't. And the truth is that I don't have to handle everything, and neither do you. We live in community. We live in community. And there will be people stepping up to help. And even if nobody else steps up to do the dishes, you might feel better equipped to deal with them tomorrow. And even if the person in your family that you're fretting about or worrying about, even if you can't fix their problem, you might have more grace or gentleness to just be present with them as they try to resolve their challenge or their problem. So this time of me being on sabbatical is really about all of us getting a sense of renewal and a sense of like creative, restful inspiration. So I encourage you to think about that for yourself as well. Maybe you've got a sermon in you that you hadn't thought you would ever have a chance to give. Maybe you want to try something new. Maybe you want to take a little vacation that's creative or different than you had ever thought you could do. Someone said to me this week when we were talking about my sabbatical, they said, well, I wish I could take a retreat for writing. I said, well, that's fascinating. Maybe you can, right? So I encourage you to think about that. I think what we're going to do is, why don't we do our closing reading? And then we'll do our question and answer and reflection time during our coffee hour time. So Ellen's going to read our closing words, and then we're going to have, or Lori's going to read our closing words. Lori, you got our closing words. See, it takes a team. It's a collaborative effort. Lori's going to read our closing words, and then we'll have time during our coffee hour time to share thoughts or reflections or any questions you all might have about what my sabbatical is going to look like, or also to share any ideas you might have for your sabbatical time. Lori, are you ready?
Yep.
Go for it.
Wayne Muller says that when we stop, we see that the world continues without us. Sweet humility and gentle mindfulness bequeath the grace to stop and see that it is good. There is no need to keep pushing. When we stop, with no chores or agenda, we let our eyes rest, our bodies heal, our activities languish, and taste the fruits of our labor. Let us take the time, no matter what our circumstances, to stop, to rest, to let the natural ebb and flow of life carry us into greater peace, greater ease, and greater wholeness.